Today, the Stewardship team is proud to host this summer service. Our team includes Carrie West, Julia Clark, who unfortunately was not feeling well today and wisely chose to stay home, and myself. We know this has been a really challenging year, not just for us, but worldwide, and we want to be responsive to that challenge, and we want to emphasize how important it is that you feel welcome here post-pandemic. In the spirit of love,
please stand as you are able to join in the reading in the covenant of our church. In the love of truth and in the spirit of Jesus, we unite for the worship of God and the service of all. Music. From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung through every land, by every tongue. Okay, now we're going to have our responsive reading, number 648 in the Gray Hymnal. Beginners. But we have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How can desire fail? We can only have begun to imagine justice and mercy. Surely our river cannot already be hastening into the sea of non-being. Not yet, not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended. We have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would join our solitudes in the communion of struggle. So much is unfolding that must be his gesture. So much is in love. Please stand as you are able to join us in hymn number 128 in the Great Hymnal, For All That Is Our Life. Please be seated. Our common prayer this morning is in the great hymnal, number 483. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night, at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests, in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. We share the joys and sorrows of our church with one another, whether spoken or silent. This morning we have a prayer request from Paul and Nancy Poppenshock. This week we mark the 76th anniversary of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is the prayer that my extended family offers for peace in our world, in our time. Divine Spirit, who has taught us to live in harmony with our neighbor, help us to break the age-old habit of war. May the day come when men will no longer arm to kill, when nations will live together as one great family. Help me to be an instrument of that peace by living peace in my own life. May your Spirit prevail, that there may be peace in our world and in our time.
Please recite with me in unison the Earth's Prayer, which is written in the upper right part of your order of service. Earth. Person, you can just drop an offering on the basket, in the basket on your way out, or feel free to use the barcode in the lower right part of your order of service, or go online at firstunitarian.com/donate, and you can also text 844-906-2338. Our first reading today is Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me into right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of darkness, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. Please join me in singing hymn number 101 in the Gray Book, Abide with Me, hymn 101.
Our second reading this morning is from a book called Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. I'm going to read a section called The Tall Tree Fairness Test. We can imagine the advantages and disadvantages that shape our lives as similar to the natural environment that shapes a tree as it grows. A tree growing on an open, level field grows straight, tall toward the sun. A tree that grows on a hillside will also grow toward the sun, which means it will grow at an angle. The steeper the hill, the sharper the angle of the tree. So if we transplant that tree to the level field, it's going to be a totally different shape from a tree native to that field. Both are adapted to the environment where they grew. We can infer the environment, the shape of the environment where a tree grew, by looking at the shape of the tree. White men grow on an open, level field. White women grow on far steeper and rougher terrain because the field wasn't made for them. Women of color grow not just on a hill, but on a cliffside over the ocean, battered by wind and waves. None of us chooses the landscape in which we're planted. If you find yourself on an ocean-battered cliff, your only choice is to grow there or fall into the ocean. So if we transplant a survivor of the steep hill and cliff to the level field, natives of the field may look at that survivor and wonder why she has so much trouble trusting people, systems, or her own bodily sensations. Why is this tree so bent and gnarled? It's because that is what it took to survive in the place where she grew. A tree that's fought wind and gravity and erosion to grow strong and green on a steep cliff is going to look strange and out of place when moved to the level playing field. The gnarled, wind-blown tree from an oceanside cliff might not conform with our ideas of what a tree should look like, but it works well in the context where it grew. And that tall, straight tree wouldn't stand a chance if it was transplanted to the hillside. One kind of adversity. How many white parents do you know who explicitly teach their children to keep their hands in sight at all times and always say yes sir and no ma'am if they are stopped by the police? That's just standard operating procedure for a lot of African American parents. Black parents in America grow their kids differently because the landscape their kids are growing in requires it. The stark difference between how people of color are treated by police and how white people are treated results in white people thinking that black people are ridiculous for being afraid of the police. We can't see the ocean, so when black people tell us we do this to avoid falling into the ocean, we don't understand. But just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. How can we tell? By looking at the shape of the tree. Trees that grow at an angle grew on the side of a hill. People who are afraid of the police grew up in a world where the police are a threat. Just because the road looks flat doesn't mean it is. Just because you can't see the ocean doesn't mean it's not there. You can infer the landscape by looking at the shapes of the people who grew in those environments. Instead of wondering why they aren't thriving on the level playing field, imagine how the field can be changed to allow everyone to thrive. Good morning, everyone. It's so good to be back in the sanctuary. This is the first church service that I have attended here since the spring of 2020 when we closed our doors due to COVID-19. For those of you watching from home, I hope that you'll be able to join us again soon too. Today I'm here representing the Stewardship team, and we are pleased to announce our theme for the upcoming campaign, Hope Grows Here. I'm going to reflect on the role that I think this congregation can play in providing a path for hope for each of us as we look toward emerging from this pandemic and starting a new church year together. We recognize that this pandemic has ravaged our community in many different ways, but they can all be characterized as a loss of some sort. Some of you may have experienced the loss of well-being that comes with contracting this virus that has long-term effects that are still not fully understood. So many people have lost loved ones, and the ability to be with them in their final hours or to properly grieve and bury their dead with time-honored rituals. The loss of social connection has been devastating for many, especially for young children unable to go to school, for those who live alone, or for those who suffer from depression or anxiety. There is the loss of financial stability for those who could no longer work, the loss of marriages that fell apart under the strain of working and schooling and living together at home full-time, and the loss of traditions, such as weddings, graduations, and other celebrations that mark the milestones in our lives. Last but not least, we witnessed the injustices inflicted upon so many people of color in this country in so many different ways. Many work on the front lines, not having the privilege of a job that could be done remotely or with access to childcare. They were not only at much higher risk of contracting COVID, but also less likely to have access to quality care or health insurance and more likely to suffer from major side effects or death. The worst injustices were suffered by those killed at the hands of police, who were sworn to serve and protect them. This is especially heartbreaking for those who are mere children. Our hearts ache with so much loss. In the face of this pain and loss, first we need to bear witness to it fully and acknowledge its depth and breadth. We need to recognize that while everyone has been touched in some way by this pandemic, by no means did we each experience it the same way. In many ways, this pandemic exacerbated the imbalance of power and privilege that has been here all along. So while to some it may seem like the social fabric of our country has been unraveling, to others it is like a veil has finally been lifted so that the burdens of inequity and injustice that they have been forced to carry are finally visible to others with lighter loads. James Baldwin wrote, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." In this spirit, we open our eyes and our hearts to those suffering among us and say, "We see you." Whatever hardship you carry, whatever heartache you bear, this is a community where you will be seen and heard and loved. Only then can we turn our faces toward hope. I think that congregations like ours are critical to the change that we hope to see in the world at large. I was so heartened to see so many fellow UUs at the marches and demonstrations over the past few years. Whether it was in support of Black Lives Matter or Gay Pride or March for Our Lives, it is the embodiment of love in action to stand in solidarity against injustice and amplify the voices of those who are traditionally not being heard. This church helps me to become the person that I want to be out in the world. This is where we practice living in right relationship with our neighbors. This is where we learn to be humble and admit that we don't have all the answers and that we have so much more to learn. This is where we learn to be vulnerable and share our hardships and ask for help, not only for our own benefit, but also so that others will see that this is a safe place for them to do the same. This is where we learn to give and receive grace. This is where we gather in the name of social justice and stand behind causes that uphold the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I have spent 20 years as part of this congregation. I have many happy memories during that time, but the ones that really stand out, the ones that have given me the most hope, are those marked by struggle and loss. During those most difficult times, this was a place that I could come to hear a message of hope to get me through one more week. When I was a weary new mom to babies and young children, I found grace in these four walls as I struggled to find my path through parenthood. As my marriage unraveled and our family felt adrift, it was here that I found stability, a sympathetic ear, and a safe community for my kids that held us as we were forced to regroup. When I struggled to find a job after having stayed home to raise my family for many years, it was this congregation where I found referrals to jobs and encouragement to apply, along with references and a letter of recommendation. When I started working full-time as a single parent and had to work late, it was other parents in this church who drove my children to events so that they could remain involved despite our new circumstances. These gestures of kindness, no matter how small, have provided some of my most uplifting moments and have put me on the path to where I am today, stronger and more resilient than ever before. An African proverb says, "If you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together." As we prepare to gather for a new church year this fall, my wish for each of you is that you realize that this is a place that you can come to share your joys and your sorrows, to be seen and heard and loved, to be reminded that you are stronger than you know, but that you don't have to do it alone, and above all, to remember that hope grows here.
Thank you, Carrie. Hello, my name is Marc Deshales, and I'm chair of the stewardship team. We, the team of Carrie, myself, and Julia Clark, are excited to kick things off with today's summer service. One of the things I really like about UU is how open it is to diverse points of view, such as my personal worldview, the ancient philosophy of life called Stoicism, which is powerful enough to me to act as an influence on my life that is as meaningful to me as theological beliefs or spiritual beliefs are to a lot of other people. One major Stoic writer was Seneca from ancient Rome. He wrote an essay called on providence. Providence meaning, there's not only a God, but there's a God that's got humans' best interests in mind. And on providence, he tried to answer the theological question, why would God let bad things happen to a good person? Well, Seneca goes on for a number of pages about this topic, but to summarize, what he says is that God does not let bad things happen to good people. The way he looks at it, a person who is most favored by God, if they're most favored, then God puts a lot of challenges in your path. When a person is challenged, they're given an opportunity to prove how resilient they are. By facing a challenge and overcoming it, he, she, or they are better off than someone who has never been challenged at all. Now, to extend this from one person to a group, such as members of First Unitarian, I'm proud of the resilience shown by this church community in meeting the challenges of the pandemic and emerging better, I think, from the experience. One of the lines from Earth's prayer we recited today was about how interdependent we are. Stewardship means more than just asking people to sign a pledge card for next year. Stewardship is also about caring for each other, here in our church and in our wider community, both in Worcester and worldwide. We are interdependent on each other for emotional support and to help each other when needed. While Unitarians, we do not have a shared dogma, we do have a shared belief in the acceptance of one another, mutual respect, and encouragement towards spiritual growth, whether that means belief in a particular theology, spirituality, science, or even no belief. This shared respect and acceptance of each other is what brought me here. It's a fellowship of mutual support for divergent points of view. Our theme this year for stewardship is Hope Grows Here, reflecting the resilience of our congregation. We've been through a lot these days. I remember back in March 2020 when our services stopped and we began to worship online. And I'd like to take the three words, hope grows here, one at a time. Hope means we are optimistic, even in the face of some remaining uncertainty, such as whether the Delta variant will cause another wave of the COVID crisis. Even more important than optimism, however, are the constructive steps we have made. Last year, for example, we reacted to everyone being shut in by calling people to make sure they are all right. We ended up calling everyone in the congregation. And this formal program was supplemented by a number of individual reach-outs, one-on-one that I heard about, where people here either asked for and got help or were offered help unasked. And I'm so proud of the event last October when so many talented people here at First Unitarian participated in the First U Virtual Review, which was our online musical and talent show that you can still see on YouTube. And I'm looking forward to a party we are planning early this October to celebrate this year's stewardship season. The word grows. Yes, we have grown in the past year. Our ability now to broadcast both via YouTube and hold in-person services is just one example, thanks in large part to our very capable musical and technical wizards. Sometimes they're the same people. For example, Henry Bolduc, our tech here today, who's manning the computers and the cameras and the microphones, played a theme from Star Wars, the Force theme, in last year's musical variety show. Growth means virtual coffee hours and club meetings with Zoom and committee work using Google Docs, people connecting via phone and text, and making sure we are all right. Growth also means how we react to our new environment. The tech companies, which were already doing pretty well with social media before the pandemic, did even better with everyone shut in at home. And they thrive on the attention economy, where the more we focus on our smartphones and our devices and social media websites, the more money they make in advertising. And in my opinion, we have to be very wary of something called indignation fatigue. I think as part of their attempt to draw us in, something that reeks of injustice is one example of a way that we stay fixed for what's going to happen after the commercial break or after our next ad swipe. And we need to be careful, however, because we can grow so used to that prompt for indignation that we either become numb to it or we start to tune it out. And I think we need to also not make the mistake of substituting in our mind the feeling of indignation with the fact that we don't want to deceive ourselves into thinking we've actually done something about it just because we feel indignation. So much more effective in terms of growth is to use our ability to reason and our value of justice to do something instead of just thinking about it. Here at First U, we are doers. We reach out, we pitch in, we help, and we've grown by acting in different ways in response to such as online and social distancing measures. We've been doing as much as we can, given our constraints. Finally, the third word in our theme, here. We are here not only in the sense of being here now physically in this church or virtually here via YouTube. We are also here in the sense of where are you emotionally? Where we are emotionally, of course, can vary greatly. As Carrie read in the second reading, called the Tall Tree Fairness Test, we are like trees planted in different conditions, some of which make it more challenging than others to survive, adapt, or even thrive. I feel very fortunate to have been planted in soil that is fertile with plenty of support and have not experienced many of the hardships that many others, some among us today, both in terms of opportunities in general in my life and in particular during the COVID crisis. I'm also fortunate to have a disposition where I'm comfortable with solitude, and as an introvert, I get my strength from lots of time alone. So not going out during the pandemic was actually meant to me, oh good, I don't have to do that social obligation, I can just stay in tonight. Before the pandemic, for 17 years, I had worked from home, and I would smile at the adjustment and stress many of the people who had never worked from home suddenly found themselves facing. So I count myself as very blessed to have been a tree growing in open, level field with plenty of water and sunshine. Here, the UU second principle of justice, equity, and compassion in human relations comes into play. Where feeling compassion for those around me, for those who have not had my advantage, is critical. Thinking about that tall tree metaphor, I soul-searched and tried to think of a true hardship that I had experienced, and I'm fortunate to have had to go back decades to the 1990s when, my cousin and my father both died in a brief period, and to recall a period of suffering. So I do consider myself very blessed. Now, yes, during the last year I've had to make some adjustments due to the pandemic, but most of them have been for the better. More time with family, more time to reflect. What this all means for stewardship is we are challenged to figure out ways in which we can help. Maybe you are in a place in your life where you can use a hand. That's fine. We're here for you. Maybe you are in a position to give a hand. Please do. There's plenty of need. The Viktor Frankl quote printed on the upper left of our order of service says, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." We cannot change the fact that a pandemic has swept the world and made a lot of people sick. We are challenged to continue to adjust our behavior based on the circumstances we find ourselves in. We have adjusted. We continue to adjust, both individually and as a group. I challenge each of us to consider how our actions today and tomorrow need to continue to change compared to yesterday. It's not enough just to think about it, though. There's a saying that a person who knows how to read but chooses not to is no better off than somebody who cannot read. Likewise, the person who has a thought about what to do about a problem but does not act is no better off than a person who has not even thought about it. Going back to Seneca and his essay on God favoring those who face challenges, let's face this challenge together as we hopefully emerge here and now from the pandemic. We have grown and we continue to grow from this situation. Think about where we are now, and let's decide what we can do, and most important, to act. And while we act, please remember, hope grows here. Please join me for hymn number 21 in your gray book, For the Beauty of the Earth, hymn 21. And please stand.
Go forth into the world in peace. Be of good courage. Hold fast that which is good. Render no one evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the afflicted. Honor everyone. Love and serve the holy, rejoicing in the power of the Spirit forever. Amen. Please be seated for the postlude.